Today, you're going to meet one of my close friends, Mike Kelley. Now, if you don't know Mike, he is a world-renowned architectural photographer. He's also a published author. He's also an educator. This guy has left his mark on the photography industry in so many different ways. I loved our conversation that we had, and in this episode, we're going to dive into lots of different things, but a few of my favorite topics include kind of creativity, how to find that art or that area that suits your specific personality. We're also going to talk about some of the influences that we had, from good to not so great, and how these people have sort of left their marks on our lives and the influences that we've had. In addition, one of my favorite questions actually came from Anthony, who is taking Mike Santos's place in operating our podcast today. And Anthony actually asked Mike kind of where he got his initial confidence in being able to just go and jump into architectural photography in the first place. We're going to get to that whole story, so much more in this episode. Let's go ahead and dive straight in. This is the TSS Podcast. It's a place for authentic conversations to uncover the stupid, simple truths that help us succeed in business, create better relationships, and lead more fulfilling lives. Welcome to Think Stupid Simple. My guest today is world-renowned architectural photographer Mike Kelley. Mike is probably, smiling. Good. He's smiling with that introduction. Seriously, though, if you haven't seen Mike's work, please check it out. Mike is fantastically creative. You've also gotten quite a bit into, photographing like airplanes, right? Like the entire...
Yeah, like I had a bit of an airplane phase there and spent a lot of time photographing airports and airplanes and everything related to aviation, I guess you could say. And then COVID sort of ended that in a hurry.
Yeah, I
So
can't imagine.
But it's interesting. But it's predominantly architectural photography, which is photographing, homes for developers, architects, hotels, magazines, newspapers, that kind of stuff. So a very sort of interesting niche,
That's
but
awesome,
one
dude.
that has been an amazing career.
Well, I have tons of stuff that I want to talk to you about, and we do have some areas that are off limits. But most for most things, we can talk about whatever we want. So, the first thing that I wanted to ask is, what are you doing in Puerto Rico right now? You're actually in Lee and Patrick's home and their
I'm
their
in
production
the
space.
Stoppers Tower here, Castle. I came out. We did a bunch of filming back in September, and the premise there was the first thing we ever filmed was done in 2013.
Now,
And
just
it
for
has
context,
gotten
for
yeah.
those that don't, know what Mike is referencing right now. So one of the reasons so Mike was creating incredible work. For quite a while. How long have you been doing architectural photography for?
10 years now.
10 years. So 7 years ago, you teamed up with the F-Stoppers boys. You teamed up with Patrick and Lee and released one of the, I would say it was the first architectural photography course that was high-end, that was showing a very unique professional aesthetic, and honestly, probably not something that most architectural photographers of your caliber wanted released at the time. Like, for basically $300, you kind of gave away everything, all the tricks, all the tips, everything.
Well, yeah, and that came about because I had asked a number of architectural photographers for, not their secrets, but sort of a help, you could say. I never assisted anybody. I just was sort of thrown into it. And I came up with, it was so difficult to get any of these guys to talk about what they were doing. And so I just kind of investigated it on my own. And I was like, I swear to God, it shouldn't be this difficult to find information on this. And so I met Lee and Patrick through a wild coincidence. And then I guess we got along well enough, and they're like, hey, you're doing some pretty cool stuff. And I had really only been, photographing professionally for 2 or 3 years at that point. And I was broke. I was living a ski bum life. And I would basically light a photo with one cheap speed light, because that's all I had to make it happen. And they were like, that's amazing. You are basically taking these high-end photographs with $500 worth of equipment. Can you do a tutorial with us? And I was like, of course, I'd love to. And so we did a tutorial back in 2013 2013, and to bring us full circle, I had been getting thoroughly disgruntled with how old the information was on that. Like we were using pocket wizards and Canon
Oh
speedlights
yeah.
and like a Rebel, and like no one uses any of this stuff anymore. So can we please film something new to replace that?
So this is
And
all
we
kind
didn't
of
know.
outdated photography equipment that we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, like the techniques were still relevant, but the equipment was gone. I looked like I was about 7 years old, and I feel like my career is legitimate now. Whereas at that point, I was just a kid doing cool stuff. Now I actually have sort of the portfolio to back it up, and my career had to catch up to the videos. So it has caught up, and I was like, can we just please film something? And we didn't really know what we were going to film. In typical F-Stoppers fashion, they all flew out to California. It was in the middle of the wildfire season we were having. Everything was gray and brown, and there was no color in the sky at all. And we had no plan. And of course, we ended up getting in like 10 fights about what we were going to film. And we filmed 5 or 6 days worth of lessons. And I came to Puerto Rico to figure out what we're going to do with all that material. Very much like we made a movie with no intention, and I came down here to sort of work through the edit and get everything arranged the way it needs to be. So I came here on the 18th, and it is like almost the 10th of December. So I've almost been here 3 weeks now, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't want to go home. California is in a shambles right now.
California is a complete crap show,
It
man.
is out of control.
So I want to real quick. I want to go back to this because I don't think people really understand. Most of our audience, well, a good portion of our audience is probably photographers and creatives, but another big portion of our audience is just people that are interested in various topics. So I have to pause and say, you guys released this first tutorial on architectural photography 7 years ago.
Yeah.
I think this was F-Stopper's second premium kind of educational course, right? Headshot photography was the first one with Peter Hurley.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
That architectural course then goes on to basically catch on fire. I mean, this thing is selling like hotcakes. Your career was already taking off, but then it blows up, and you guys continue. So the release of that course kind of proved this entire business model, that it is possible to create high-end education, and that it's possible to get a high-end education without going to a university, without paying $30,000, without being in debt, at the end of this thing, and to actually just jump in and begin working with your career. So I thought it was huge, and it kind of, between you and Peter Hurley, this sort of birthed what F-Stopper is now with all these different educational courses. But it also kind of, I would say, influenced every other company that was, including our own. Like SLR Lounge was influenced by seeing your guys' success in that. Creative Live was influenced by that and seeing, okay, it is possible to bring in other creatives and to create content and create this successful, profitable model. Okay, so now fast forward 7 years, you're back in Puerto Rico and you're filming part 3. Is it 3 or what?
I don't know. We don't want to cannibalize. We've done 3 total. We decided to do one that just focuses on very simple real estate photography. As something who is looking to purchase a home, I'm sure you have purchased a home. A lot of people watching are in the process of, or have purchased, or would like to buy a home. The most frustrating part
Garbage
is
photos.
the photos are so horrendous.
They're horrible.
And so we made the most, not watered down, but the simplest, easiest tutorial for people who either don't own a camera, or people who own a camera but are wedding photographers, or just hobbyist photographers who have no idea how to shoot a house, how to make your own home, or how to be a real estate photographer. And it doesn't get involved. Like, if you go on real estate photography forums, people get super deep into the whole like technique and this and that light, and we need the gun light, and we're going to do it in Photoshop. None of that. This is just how to take a good photo that will look good on Zillow. And you don't need crazy techniques, just straightforward, honest photography that shows the house the way people want to see it. So that's going to be kind of like an evergreen tutorial. It uses the simplest software. We don't open Photoshop. It's just, here's where to put the camera. Here's how to make it look good. Here's how to turn the lights on and off. Here's how to get the view, all in camera. in as little post-production as possible. So that is, and I'm sure we're going to get hate for that. And you'll be like, you're teaching people, like the windows are blown out, or you don't teach them how to suck the whites out of the ceiling. I'm like, we don't need to do that. We just need to get photos that are 90% of the way there. And I feel like that would, and it's going to be a lower cost, sort of easy thing for people to follow.
I think that's a great idea.
Tutorial, go ahead.
Well, that's a great idea, because I think that's the most relatable of, if somebody is buying a home, you've definitely seen very craptastic real estate photographs, like you've seen that.
Yeah.
I also get asked the question a lot, like, how do I take better real estate photos? So I think there's a huge, kind of a larger audience there of people that there's a significant, like, it's this bridging product, right? Right now you have this architectural photography, and to be honest, like, there is some gap there. And when someone looks at your current education and they see that you're photographing, $2 million, $5 million, $10 million homes, I mean, you've probably gone to, how high, Mike? 20 million, 30 million, 50 million?
I've done $150 million home. I did 125. It's crazy. It's beyond.
So ridiculously unapproachable for the vast majority of people, that I think it's important for you to have this bridging product that's like, look, this is where you're going to start, and then this is where you're going to go. Yeah. So this is part one, and then you mentioned you're filming another piece then.
Yeah, so, and then we went to a $36 million home, a $40-odd million home, and I was like, here is how I photograph this stuff. And strangely enough, the techniques are 90% the same.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's not like, I hate to admit this because it undermines everything I've ever done tutorial-wise, but 90% of the photo is just finding the right spot, whether you're shooting a $300,000 home in Missouri, pardon me if anyone's from Missouri, or just a normal home somewhere, and
don't worry, Mike, you're not going to get canceled.
A $100 million home in the hills of California, like 90% of it is exactly the same.
It is.
But there's a lot of things that we go into in the new tutorial. I don't know what, we just edit everything. They might release it. They might kind of drip it out like an IV and do a $30 lesson thing. They might do a big tutorial. I don't know. It's not my question to answer. But there's a lot of things, like we interview art directors. We interview, architects who are actually hiring photographers. We talk about the relationships that you have to foster to get to that level. And I think you can take that and apply it. Say you want to be like a yacht photographer, or you want to be a high-end portrait photographer or product photographer. I don't feel like photography is the hard part of any of that. And 100%. People will probably be annoyed. Well, he just set up the camera in this literally $10 million living room in this $50 million home, and he just took one picture. And I'm like, that's all it needs to be, because we're here at the right time with the right light, with the right angle and the great furniture. But it's all the other steps that you take to get there. I don't think that the pictures I'm taking now are inherently more difficult than photographing a cheap home. I just think it's all this behind the scenes stuff that had to get me there. And I find that far more interesting than the actual act of photographing, because once you're in there, some of these homes, you put the camera anywhere, it's going to be hard to take a bad picture. And as long as you keep the vertical line straight, you don't shoot too wide, you know what time of day to shoot it at. I get 90% of my images like in one or two pictures and just a light blend in Photoshop, and that's that. And I think people make it harder than it has to be, especially when they're like really pushing hard to be the next high-end guy in town. And I admit, I did this too. And you're doing 65 layers in Photoshop, and there's great techniques. I can Photoshop my way out of prison at this point. You know what I mean? But most of the time I don't use that stuff when I'm shooting these crazy, crazy homes. So it's in a way two similar products, but with two very different goals.
Well, going back to one of the things that you mentioned, it kind of reminds me, education in a nutshell. And I honestly feel like this is across the board. It's not specific to photography. It's not specific to anything. It's literally what education is across the board, is making things relatable. Because most people that are coming in from a standpoint of learning, they really, I'm not sure if it's that they lack I do think it is, they lack the ability to be able to think outside the box a little bit. because this is a completely different area that they are coming into, right? And I would say that, when I'm approaching, like, say, jiu-jitsu or other areas that I have absolutely no experience in, it's the exact same thing. Where I will say, for example, one of the recent videos that I posted was a photograph of my daughter in a cute onesie, just sitting on a blanket. Used a blue blanket as the sky.
Just the clouds. You put the clouds next to the window with the cotton.
So
yeah,
incredibly simple, right? And then someone, like, I proceeded to then receive multiple comments of, this is great, but can you show us how to do a Christmas setup? And I'm like, yeah, you do the exact same thing, but swap the props for, ornaments and a tree. But it's literally the exact same technique. And I reposted the video with a Christmas, like a wreath and like ornaments and stuff. And people were like, oh my goodness, this is so helpful. And what I've realized over the years is that you can demonstrate something with a flash, but if somebody doesn't own that particular brand of flash, if they don't own that particular lens, if they don't own that particular camera, they're going to ask you, yeah, but how do I do it with what I have? So I think what they're most interested in seeing is, like, for you, the techniques are 90% identical, but to them, it's seeing those techniques brought to their world and what's relatable to them that then helps them to expand their vision of, like, okay, now I understand where to start. And that as they keep going, they can start to kind of build that ability to kind of think outside of what's directly in front of me.
Right. And I think that touches on an interesting point. I was pretty sure I was born to wear a suit. My father worked in New York, I don't know, doing God knows what in some huge office building. My mother was a secretary. I think that's how they met. And I went to school, and it was STEM.
Yeah.
Math and science, and I was horrible at all this stuff. And I got lucky, and I met an art teacher my sophomore year of high school, and that was the first time a teacher sort of let me do something on my own and sort of gave me the tools to think outside the box. And she didn't do my homework for me, but she was like, look, and I just started to learn about all these things that I could do. And that was when I feel like art became a very important part of my life. But it was not until I was shown that by a teacher who was able to sort of unpack that for me that I could realize, oh, I can think critically. And people are like, oh, you're so lucky, and you got into architectural photography at the right time, and you got in at the digital end of the digital revolution or whatever, and you did the tutorials first with f-stoppers. And I'm like, no, the real luck I had was meeting that teacher, because if she didn't teach me how to, use the toys in the sandbox, I would have never developed that critical thinking. And I feel like one of the greatest missteps in the current American education landscape is every single kid is advised STEM, go into STEM so you can make a career, so you can work in tech, so you can work in finance, so you can do this and that. And I'm like, we have continued, I know that they say, oh, it's STEAM, we got to add art in there now. But if you look at,
I've never heard that, STEAM.
I just feel like, and it is such an injustice, and colleges are dropping their liberal arts curriculums left and right in favor of getting these kids to sort of just do the same curriculum, to get in line, to learn their math, to learn their science, to learn, the old English literature. And yes, that is important to a degree, but it's not really teaching kids to think outside the box. I feel so lucky that I was able to have, these art classes, and I just packed my schedule with as many as I could. And that allowed me to sort of play with all these different tools, whether it was a rotary saw or a hammer and nails or a clay throwing wheel or a camera or a piano or whatever it was. That was far more helpful to me than any class I ever took. And so I don't want to say like everyone needs to study art, but I just feel like being able to have a little variety in a curriculum to foster that sort of independent, free-spirited thinking. And it's something I see all the time. I get people email me, like you said, but how do I do it with my equipment?
Mm-hmm.
Well, no one ever taught you, like, if you want to build a cabinet, you don't need to use the same woodworking tools that you saw in the Lowe's commercial. You just need something similar. And for some reason, that was like lost on photographers.
I think that's lost on everybody, dude.
Can do the same thing. Yeah.
I think that's lost on everybody. And I think the other side of this is, from your experience, it's incredible how one person can make such a dramatic difference in somebody's way of thinking, in their life, in their
Yeah.
future life, just by the things that they say, right? And I have
Right.
the exact opposite experience from the one that you just said. So my high school art teacher told me to quit. So I
I
did.
can imagine how much damage that would do.
No, I literally did. I put down my like I it was that day that I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to draw anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do this anymore. And now I'm 40 years old, I can think back and I can kind of sort of see his perspective, right? I mean, this was, and I'm not going to say his name, but this was a teacher who I think he genuinely loved and cared for his students, and he was a good and genuine person. What he saw, what his experience was look, I'm already actually very good at art and all of this stuff. I'm good at art, I'm good at photography, I'm good at painting, and yet I can't make a living doing this. I'm teaching it in high school. And he would do galleries and he would do showings and he'd do all these things, and his work would never sell, but his work was good. So what he's seeing is this student that comes who's looks like he's trying and looks like, he's putting in the effort, but just isn't getting anywhere or really isn't progressing the way that he thinks I should. So he lets me know, like, I think you should quit. This just isn't for you. So dude, I did. I put down every creative thing that I had for it. It took me 10 years. I would be 28 years old. At that time I was, I think, 17. I would be 28, 29 years old before ever trying again. But that's the inverse to your experience of like one person kind of showing you. The same thing can happen where, they kind of, one person can kind of close off an entire pathway.
You know what is such a travesty, and I think this is like the greatest injustice ever done to the arts, is that art curriculums teach the medium,
Yeah.
but they do not teach the business of it, and or how to make a living as an artist, which I don't think is inherently difficult. I don't think that you need talent. I mean, you have to be a certain base level of good, right? Like competency. But you do not need to be the next Ansel Adams or Van Gogh or Picasso or whoever, whatever artist. It doesn't matter. Any musician, it's being able to sell those services is what's important. And I minored in art in college. So it was, I don't know, 16 classes over 4 years or something. Not once did I have a teacher tell me, here is how to sell art. It was all critiques and look at what these old masters did, and study this graphic design and the way they put together shapes and the ratios. And I'm like, I just feel so lucky that I was immediately thrown into the business of photography.
For sure.
But we do a great job of teaching people the history of the art, which is important, I think, to a degree, but that is not going to help you make money at it. And so as a result, all these liberal arts majors have a bad rap, but it's not art itself that is unprofitable. It's that we have done a horrendous job of setting our students up for making a living in the art.
But isn't that, I mean, couldn't I argue that is the case with every discipline that you get taught throughout high school and college? In every single format.
Because all of those disciplines, they have a track that goes right into working for someone else. No one teaches you how to work for yourself.
But see, that's not even what so all the other disciplines, right? Computer science, for example. Mm-hmm. It's not as if they teach you what it's like to work in a company. It's not like they teach you what it's like to work. Some places might impart some of that, where they teach you like interpersonal relationship skills and all kind of skills that apply to like working in a team and like how to set up environments for teams. They teach you the baseline skills of something. And then it's the company that takes over. There just happens to be companies that are hiring people with a baseline education in computer science. There are no companies that just want to hire somebody with baseline education in art. Similarly, there's not really any companies that want to hire someone with a baseline education in math or in, psychology. Like there are some places, but the issue that I have, and I'm going to maybe get myself into trouble here, but the issue that I have with education is that most of what you learn is theoretical, and there's very little bridging between theory versus practical applications. Like, how come you've taught me about psychology, yet you haven't taught me how to create a functioning relationship? Like a functioning friendship, a functioning, anything. I don't care what it is. How we escape, if relationships are literally the difference between success, happiness, and failure in one's life, which I would argue that point. How is it that we've escaped?
All the psychology teachers I've had have been horrendous, horrendous human beings.
Yeah, and we've escaped. We've gone through college. I got 2 degrees in college. I finished my high school education, and I escaped all of that without learning how to create or maintain a successful relationship, like friendship, marriage, anything. How is that possible when this is so that's my issue with all these different subjects, is that we learn these, like you said, the history of art, which is interesting. It's unique, but we don't learn the practical applications of it. Nobody in my godforsaken art education said, look at Rembrandt and how he, has applied this, Rembrandt style lighting to the face, and look at the painterly chiaroscuro that he sets up, putting your subjects over a darker background. Nobody has done that and said, Pi, you can actually do that and apply it to this. They simply just show you what it was. So we leave this entire experience not knowing how to apply what we learn to practical applications. And then I think it just permeates through our entire existence, where I show you how to take a picture and you're like, but I don't have that camera. Because we're taught from the time that we're young that you basically replicate exactly what you learn. You don't learn practical applications. So if you don't have the exact things that you need, then you can't do it. That's my long-winded take on this.
I think that you have good points. Another thing that sort of tails onto that is I feel like all of these people who are pushing or whatever, what am I trying to say here? I want to formulate this correctly. If you look at all of the things that make any culture or country what it is today, what do you think people go visit Europe to see?
For Europe, I would think historical stuff.
Well, what kind of historical stuff?
Castles, architecture.
What do you think makes all that stuff? It's
What's
the
that?
artists, right?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
musicians, it's artists, it's painters, but no one is pushing students into studying art. Everyone is like your teacher was like, no, quit now while you can,
Well, they don't relate that, right? I mean, you don't relate
the
Sistine Chapel or, whatever you want to, nobody relates this and says, this could actually be you. Like, you can actually go and create. You could actually go and change, the way that we see things. Nobody does that.
Right. You're right. And no one ever takes you on a tour and says, you could be the guy who designed this building or something like that. Rather, we just, for some reason, try to funnel everyone into the same 4 majors. And we advise them, and we make, the butt of all jokes is the liberal arts degree. And it's not because they're bad, it's because we've done a horrible job setting these people up for success. Which brings me back to the point you were making, is we don't teach those relationship skills or the navigating the professional environment.
Yeah, creativity, in my opinion, so I have written this one book on relationships, and the next one that I'm thinking that I want to tackle is potentially creativity, right? Because I think that people don't realize that creativity is a function in every career. I think that, it doesn't matter whether you're programming a computer, whether you're designing bridges, whether you're, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Creativity is a function of your job. Even as a lawyer who, we think of lawyers as like these people that they have no soul, which I will argue that many do not have a soul, but there is a lot of creativity or actual possibility for creativity in the way that they argue, in the way that they set up an argument and prove points and all that kind of stuff. But we don't teach that. And frankly, people are expected to be born with it or without it. So I have that question for you, my friend. What do you think about creativity? Is that a learned skill, or is it something that you're either born with or you're not?
I don't buy. I feel that people need to find their medium. I love, more than anything on this planet, playing and making music.
Okay.
If I could give up photography right now and go be a bass player in some touring band, I would throw my cameras into the dumpster and walk off into the sunset with my guitar held over my head. But I suck at music. And I don't know if it's, I don't feel like, I just feel like people need to find or be okay with the fact that there are certain art forms that lend themselves to people's personalities.
Yeah.
I feel like photography is a perfect match for my personality. As much as I love music, I don't think I would be a good band member. I do think I'm a good independent creative. I am not a good collaborative creative.
Team
I
environment.
tell my clients, I don't want anybody on set. Yeah, I want to be able to do my thing. And so I've played in a few bands, and they've come to me and they say, write a bass line for this part. And I'm like, and then they're like, well, here's some feedback on it. And I'm like, I don't really like it. And I don't think that makes me, it doesn't mean my head is 6 feet up my ass. It just means that I don't think that is a great creative match for me. And I can love music, and the extent of my musicianship is playing in front of my computer in between, editing sprees.
Yeah.
But I still, if I could find a way to make it work. Anyway, I feel like people need to find the skill that they are best matched to. But I also don't think that you are born creative, or you are born a tennis player, or you are born a hockey player. You just need to find maybe this one of a number of things that you would be a great personality match for. And when you find that, you can really, really get on that rocket ship and take it as far as you want to. Does that make sense?
I think you're spot on with that. That mirrors a lot of the things that I say. And Mike, if you lean forward, do I actually hear you better? Can you lean forward a little bit? Look at that. We've improved audio by just leaning in. Look at that. And we get to see your face. All nice and big like. So we were talking about finding that thing that fits your personality, right? And
yeah,
I 100% agree with you. But when you talk about this, so when you're talking about the reason why music wasn't necessarily a fit for you, it really wasn't that you weren't good enough, because I do feel like a person can become good enough with the time and with the investment into something that the average person can be good enough at anything. What you're saying, though,
right,
is that it's the other pieces of being a musician that didn't fit your personality. Namely,
it was the personality match that music
correct. Yeah.
it wasn't my thing. So I needed to find a medium, photography, that was a match for me. And once I found that, I was really able to take it to the next level.
Yes.
I hate to use that phrase because everyone says it, but I was able to sort of push through those barriers, and make it my career. Whereas music, I never was able to, because it was sort of a personality mismatch. I was never able to push as far as I wanted.
See, that's what I tell people. That's exactly what I think happened to me in high school, like with my art teacher. I think my art teacher was looking at, I have ADHD, and I wasn't actually clinically diagnosed with this until I think I told you it was like a month ago or something.
6 months ago or something, yeah.
It was very recent that I was like, what is going on with my mind? And I actually went and they're like, yeah, you have ADHD. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I've had this since I was a kid. And they're like, yeah. So for me, sitting down to paint, which was that class was like a painting and sketching class, right? Where you would spend 20 to 30 hours doing portraits of somebody. Now, for me and my personality, I remember drawing a picture of Einstein, and he was the person that I selected to create a portrait of. And it was a pencil sketch. And I mean, I drew the shiz out of that eyeball, man. I mean, for the first 4 hours, I just focused on Einstein's eyeball, like his left eye, and it looked fantastic. And then about 4 hours in, I was like, dude, this sucks. Like I'm not able to stay focused. And so I spent 4 hours on an eyeball, and then I finished the rest of this thing in 2 hours. So you can imagine what this thing looked like. It was a very detailed and nice eyeball surrounded by what was a high-end, pencil stick figure, basically, of Einstein. So my teacher gets this, and then he says, you should quit. This isn't for you. What he didn't understand, though, was that my personality, like what you said, is not, it's not for sitting there for 30 hours. And that's when I found photography was such a perfect bridge because I could create and get to a final product with sometimes within minutes, at most within 1 to 2 hours on a picture, and it fit that kind of drive to be able to get from start to finish on something within my attention span, right? And then it, like you said, I could actually stick with it, and that's where you level up, right? When you stick with something, then you're going to get better at it.
So yours might have been more of a time commitment, whereas mine was like just it's something I can do. I've always been the weird kid who wandered off into the woods while everyone else played soccer. You know what I mean? But for me, it's a very individualistic pursuit. And yeah, I do like that there are times when I can make a picture in 30 seconds just because I got there at the right time or I knew what I wanted and it was easy to finish. But then there's also photographs where I've taken a literal year working on them on and off to get it to the point where I'm happy with it.
Yeah, so, your airplanes pictures, right? I mean, those take,
I
can't imagine how much time, how many layers that you work through.
Multiple trips in some cases and spending weeks just waiting and waiting and waiting.
In fact, Anthony, can we actually pull up some of these pictures of Mike's? I want to actually show people like what we're talking about, because what you're doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you're sitting basically underneath a flight path photographing these airplanes as they go overhead. Then you're taking hundreds of these photographs, putting them into Photoshop and hand painting out each of those, right? You're hand painting out. Yeah, look at this. And if you zoom into them, the detail is gnarly.
Yeah, and some of them, they are, I took a 50 megapixel file and basically create a 300 megapixel image, and you can zoom in, you can walk up to it, and you can see people's faces in the windows.
That's incredible, dude. That is insane.
So, yeah, there are some really crazy ones. Let's find a fun one here.
Oh, I love that. That is so incredible. So that is very time consuming. See, that's the exact kind of image that definitely would fall out of my personality type. Like, I would not be able to sit there for that amount of time to be able to just perfect that one thing. But oddly enough, I can sit there and write for long periods of time. So writing,
I can't. I'm trying to run a blog, and it's so hard for me.
Yeah, it's. But this is such a key piece here, and so my next topic that I actually want to broach is stupid simple creativity. And that is one of the pieces that I want to talk about, is finding the right fit for who you are, finding the right fit to your personality, to your quirks, to your, like, that is essentially what you need to do to be able to unlock this kind of creative. Oh, this is incredible. Look at this.
So you can just zoom and zoom and zoom and zoom and zoom.
And what resolution were these?
This is like 250 megapixels or something. I mean, look, you can read that little nuts. Airbus A330-200 on the nose there. And I'm not sure what it looks like through the connection.
Here, go.
But you can print this at 20 feet and walk up, and you can see Goodyear on the tire. So, and you get I get very meditative when I'm doing this kind of thing. So.
Oh, you have to, man. I mean, this is, for those that are looking at this and are like, that's just a nice photograph. No, these are individually cut out, and you can see the level of detail that Mike has gone into and making sure that the overlays are flawless. The lighting is perfect, like everything. So this is the crazy part, because what people don't realize is that you weren't getting paid to create that picture.
No, not at all.
When you went out and you started shooting, you're okay. So running back to your career, I do want to get to the early days of your career, but let's focus kind of, you've created this tutorial, your architectural photography is taking off. You're getting paid good amounts of money, not only to go out and to photograph these properties, but you're also able to educate, and you're doing well on the education side. You're becoming this leader in this space, right? Then you make the completely asinine decision of, I'm just going to go and waste my life sitting underneath airplanes, not getting paid jack crap to make this photograph. Or at least that's what it looks like from the outside. This is where I want to talk about personal work. Yeah. I mean, you, to anybody else that's looking at this, You'd be like, okay, Mike, you're getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do what you do. You're telling me that now you're just going to spend the next several weeks sitting underneath airplanes and just like editing out for free? That makes
Yeah.
no sense whatsoever. But let's talk
Um,
about personal work and why it does make sense. So tell me about that experience.
that I mean, it's that to me is a creative outlet that I find very enjoyable. I don't have a client telling me what to do, where to put the camera. I'm making photographs purely for myself to fulfill my excitement within my sort of love for the genre. But the interesting thing is that those pictures now are a substantial part of my income. I think last year I did 88,000. I net like $88,000 in print sales off of pictures that I made years ago. Without, I mean, I don't touch them; they just
From
sell,
wasting time sitting underneath airplanes, you now make
and
$100,000
it's
a year.
a whole other income stream. And this year has been lower because of COVID, but also the pictures have a whole new life of their own because a lot of those airplanes have been retired. They're not economical to fly anymore. So I kind of captured aviation at its peak, if you will. It'll never look like that again, which is, I got really lucky with that. But the idea was that was something I just wanted to do for myself. It was like a cool concept that I saw. And I kind of took architectural photography techniques of photographing the same scene 10 different ways and compositing it all together. And I was like, I can do that with airplanes. I used to go watch airplanes for fun. I would get breakfast or lunch and go sit outside of LAX and just watch planes take off, which I find very calming for some reason. I'm strange, I know. And so I'm like, why don't I photograph planes like I photograph architecture? And the first one was a huge hit. It went crazy viral immediately.
It was all over the place.
It was on Good Morning America.
Yeah, it was all like you could not for it was almost like a month. For a straight month I would wake up, and we run a publication as well. So like everybody's sending
Yeah.
me tips and stuff, and for almost a straight month I'm just getting tips. Hey, have you seen this picture of Mike? I'm like, "Yes. We've seen it. We've published it. We've talked about it." Like we've seen it.
Stop.
So, yeah, this thing goes crazy, and it it brings me back to like there's this mindset of now I don't want to say that it's only photographers that think this way. I think there's this kind of mindset in other areas too. Whether you are an animator, whether you're a painter, whatever it is. For some reason, those that are just entering the space, those that are usually newer in those areas, have this kind of, well, you shouldn't be doing it if you're not getting paid sort of philosophy. There is, this concept that free work damages everybody else, and this concept that if you're going out and you're doing something, and I couldn't disagree with it more. Because if you look at any successful, like this is one great example, your own case study right here. But you look at any athlete, look at Dwayne Wade. You cannot tell me that he's only playing basketball when he's being paid to play basketball. No.
Right.
Every single professional athlete is doing the thing 99% of the time when they're not getting paid. And then the 1% of the time that they're getting paid, they show up and they do what they know. They show up and they create. Now, when you release that image, when it did what it did and it went around, that to me was a signal to every airline, to every airport, to every person that would say, hey, this might be of interest to us, that, okay, Mike Kelley just created this really cool thing. This would be really great. Maybe we're going to change it up. Maybe we're going to do something a little bit different, but we want this in our airport. We want this in the lobby of our, business. We want this, or we want something similar to this. Can Mike do this with cars? Can Mike do this with a racetrack? Could Mike do this? It signals that you're ready to hire for these other things. And you've not only sold those prints, but you've also worked several gigs, right? Where people hire you to come in and photograph.
Yeah. So FedEx, for example, hired me to do one, which is really a very cool experience. I did one for the Dubai airport. I did one. No, it was Emirates. It wasn't the Dubai airport. Emirates, the airline, had me do one for their.
So tell me about
I
that.
think it
You
was
flew out there?
It was, yeah, it was their 25th anniversary, 30th. It was one of their anniversaries, and they wanted one of all of their aircraft in the photo, and that was a pretty cool experience.
That's
And
so
while I was
cool.
there, I of course did one for myself, which was just the Dubai airport in general. But I did one for Emirates, and that was the original reason I was out there. And then I did one for the Auckland airport in New Zealand. And so it's opened all these interesting gateways, and not only in aviation photography, but in architectural photography, strangely enough as well. People will be like, "Oh, like I saw your airport photo," and I was like, "That's really cool." And then I went to your website, and I was like, "Oh my God, he's an architectural photographer. I got to hire him because I'm an architect." It was just, and I think the whole thing points to the trend or the idea that if people will get along with you, they'll hire you to do anything.
Yes.
You know what I
Yes.
mean? And I feel like half of our job as a photographer is making sure that people will get along with us. And in my case, in particular, if someone can see that they're going to have shared interests or shared hobbies, and we're going to be stuck in a small room together for 12 hours photographing a house as we work through the thing, there'll be an more interesting time for them than someone that is a complete dry as a bone, no hobbies, no interests, whatever. So that is a just photograph things you love. If you love guitars, photograph guitars. Maybe you'll have a client who is a guitar enthusiast, and on your personal site, they will see, oh my God, like we could get along on this subject and chat about it all day while we're shooting. Or whether maybe it's cars, maybe it's who knows what. But I would say showing that showing your personal side, your personality is a huge part of getting hired as at least for what I do. I don't know about you.
No, it
Um,
completely is. And I would say
yeah.
there's a smart way of doing this and a not so smart way. Like, I'm not saying that if you are a wedding photographer, or let's say you are a digital artist and you've been doing something for 10 years and you're good at it,
Yeah.
you'd be a complete ass if you're like, okay, I'm going to go and just work for exposure. I'm going to go and, do this thing that I've been doing for this long and I've proven myself with, and I'm going to go and do it for free. That's devaluing yourself. What we're talking
I
about is
literally,
stepping
I think the
outside.
difference is, yeah, if you self-directed work is amazing. If you're not getting paid for it, it's how you grow and develop as an artist. But when people are telling you what to do, that's the difference.
For sure. They have, I mean, if you're getting paid, you're operating on someone else's agenda. Like, you have to do what it is
Right,
that they're asking.
right.
So
But
tell me
if you're
about.
doing your, yeah, go ahead.
No. So yes, I agree with you 1,000% that every person needs to be doing their own personal work, because that's the only way to signal outside that, hey, I'm also qualified to do this. Hey, I can also do this. People hire for what you show them, and that is across the board, not just in
Mhm.
this specific vision,
Yeah.
specifically to photography. But tell me, so when you're photographing for Emirates, were you like literally sitting under the flight path and they're like radioing in and like, okay, we've got a 737 coming in? Like, what is the logistic coordination of that?
That so yeah, they have, and I'm sure I'm butchering the terminology, and some airline enthusiast is going to write in and be like, "You said it wrong," but it's they have a sheet or they have a schedule of what airplane and when it takes off and when it's going to arrive. And so we were prepared, and we had met the day prior to go through and make sure that everything would be included, and that they're going to be using the correct runway, and that we're going to be in the right spot. But there's not a lot that you can do to alter the course of an airline. It's like changing an aircraft carrier's direction. I
Yeah,
mean, it's every little thing costs $1 million.
for sure.
Getting, like switching the airplane to a different one or something is going to cost $50,000 in personnel and maintenance and fuel and just pushing it with the tug or whatever. So we waited for the day when the stars would align and we'd have the right weather, and it was perfect.
And they kind of had to
But yeah,
know
I
that
mean,
that's the day that all their planes would be used. That's the day that,
right.
so they're like kind of logistically piecing this together. So on that day, you're kind of shooting
Yes.
it as it
And
happens.
they have the Airbus A340 and the A330 and the 777 and the A380 and whatever other airplanes they have. And on this day, they will all be taking off between 8 and noon.
Yeah.
And if you want the shot, that's when it has to happen. Otherwise, it's like the moon. You're gonna get a full moon once a month, right?
Yeah.
And so you might get close to it, but you won't get the whole thing, except on the 17th day of January. And so it's very similar. It's like as the schedule, because all the flights are going through time zones, and maybe the one plane goes to Hong Kong 3 times a week, but then it goes to Los Angeles once a week, and then they rotate the planes through that way. So it's kind of this staggered
It's basically
schedule.
landscape photography. I mean, when you're describing this, I'm thinking of landscape photography of like, somebody who's, like what's that guy that Peter Lick, right? So Peter Lick has scouts all over the world who are just waiting for the stars to align to basically call in and say, hey, you got to be in Switzerland at this time. We're going to have the perfect weather, the perfect everything. And they're going to line up everything. So in an arena where you have no control over the subject that you're photographing, you're essentially logistically planning when everything is going to align, right? Like this is, that's such an interesting experience. And it kind of, I think, blows my mind that you got all of this from that personal work that you did.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of my architectural photography career too, the same thing. This book, I did this book that's just like F-Stoppers has it on their counter right here. I got hired to photograph
I own that
all
book
this
too,
stuff.
Mike. I buy my friends' books.
A book is very much a personal project.
Yeah, and I gotta say,
Publisher came to me. Yep, go ahead.
if you guys, hold on, Mike, I have sinned and I didn't light our recording candles. These are my candles that I light whenever we are recording.
For good luck.
And so first, let me handle that. Look, if you are you don't even have to be a photographer. If you simply like coffee table books, if you like looking at amazing images of architecture, it's just a beautiful book. You guys need to pick up Mike's book. As soon as you release that, I had a copy ordered already. So it's sitting in my little photography library. But can you hold that up and kind of show? It's a beautiful book, dude. I don't know how long did that take you?
It was 3 months of photography and then probably just as long in post-production. So it was 6 months of my life. Books pay. Sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm drinking this LaCroix and it's bubbling everywhere.
You couldn't even spring for like the Perrier. You got to go with the. No, I go with LaCroix too.
LaCroix.
I think it's LaCroix.
So a publisher comes to someone, and the publishing rates, they're nothing. They are. I think I lost money honestly because of what they paid me.
Oh, for sure.
I spent more on assistance and retouching and
just your time.
I rented an apartment close to downtown Los Angeles because I didn't want to commute.
First world problems.
Every day. But if you live in LA, then you know.
If you live in LA, you definitely know that is necessary.
And so, I made $0 on this, but over the last 2 years that it's been out, I have made way more money because this is the best business card ever.
Oh, for sure,
I
dude.
slide this across someone's desk, and they're like, have you been published? And I'm like, how about the book? I did a coffee table book that you can find in the literal Broad Museum gift shop or the MoMA gift shop or whatever. I get people from Melbourne and from Stockholm and from Tokyo email me pictures of this because I saw it in a bookstore. But you don't get paid anything. That's just the way books are.
It's like 10%, right? What do they give you? 10% of the book sale? What is it?
4%.
4%? That is nuts. And was there an advance to help you to cover costs?
There's an advance. I think it was like $7 or $8 grand. It wasn't. Maybe it was more like 10. I remember they offered me like a mid 4 figures, and I was like, this is LA. I could rack that up in parking tickets just getting these pictures.
That's nothing.
So we need to bump that up. And so, and then I believe it is 4%. It could be. It might change, like depending on where the book is sold, because the margins are different. All I know is I get a check in the mail for a couple $100 a month or something. It's not a lot, but to the right person that has incredible value, because they can see that I'm capable of doing a project like this. And what's also great about this is I was able to license these images. I've probably made 10 times what I made on the actual book, licensing the images to the clients in the book.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if a museum or a concert hall or a high rise or a developer or whatever, if they need pictures, I can say, hey, I just photographed your project for this book. Would you like to buy the images? Most of the times they say yes.
Well, having that book, dude, puts you on a completely different level. Like I don't know if you think about this, but you know, when you've created your first piece of, let's say, like an educational content, you know, that puts you on a different level. You know, there's very few creators that have developed a full length course, let alone a good full length course. So that's already putting you into the 1%, you know, grouping. When you've released a book,
Bernie Sanders hates him.
which hates who?
The 1%, me.
Oh, I mean 1%, not income wise. I mean
I know.
1%ers
But
people that have achieved that thing, right? Then you release a book. Now I have to bet. I would put my money on if 1% is willing to go and create a video course, because video courses are dramatically easier than books. I would imagine 0.001% actually complete and publish a book. Like there is very few people that do that. So having those two things is better than any form of collegiate certificate, education, award, anything. You are an author and an educator and a creator, an architectural photographer, and that's huge. But this is the thing, though, is that to be able to create that book, you had to have had yourself in a financial position where you weren't worried about your income for that 3 to 6 month period.
Yeah.
So nobody, like, I think that's what's difficult in becoming a creator, is that there's so many great long-term choices that you have that you're not privy to because you're not in a financial position to be able to make long-term decisions. So people keep making short-term decisions because they just have to put food on the table.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I tell a lot of photographers who do my video courses or who, you know, I run like some social media groups for people who want to do this, and they will say, how do you negotiate a job properly? And I
Yeah.
will tell them, do not quit your day job until you have 6 months of expenses in the bank.
Yeah.
Because if you need to win every job you're bidding on, you will never be able to charge a lot of money,
For
ever.
sure.
Because you'll be afraid to say, I want $10,000 for this. You'll say, I'll do it for 500. I don't care. I just need the money to keep food on the table.
Absolutely. You make
You
terrible decisions.
have got to have, and the greatest place you can be in as an artist is to just literally get an email and not be interested in it because you have other work that is, you know, you're being paid better, or you like the client more, or the subject is more tantalizing.
Tantalizing. I like that word.
You can only get to that point if you make the sacrifice to keep a day job or build up a nest egg or something. And I feel like a lot of people, they do this all or nothing approach where they quit everything and they're going to be a creative. I hate that word, creative, but that's what we're calling it. They're going to be a musician or they're going to be a photographer. That's even worse. And they're running in front of a steamroller picking up nickels.
Yeah. I can't agree with you more on this, that like you can't make good long-term decisions when you're starving. When and that's the people kind of look at this and go, you know, they have a hard time kind of bridging gaps, right? We already talked about bridging gaps, and one of those gaps is they can't even imagine what it would be like to charge $10,000 for something because they are stuck, like you said, taking $500 gigs just to be able to pay rent. And when you're stuck in that position, you reek of it. You reek of desperation. Every single sales meeting that you take, every single consultation, every single time that you put your foot forward, you stink of desperation. And people can smell it.
So the rate sheet that I send is the opposite of desperation. And it's basically a take it or leave it approach. I don't really leave room for negotiation. And I think clients appreciate the fact that they see in one sheet what they are getting as soon as I send it. There's no chicanery. I'm not going to upsell them. Everything they want is right in front of their right in front of them, and it almost sends the message that I don't have time to bother negotiating. So if you're gonna hire me, shit or get off the pot. You know what I mean?
I
And
love it, dude.
I thought that I would lose bookings like crazy by taking that approach, and the opposite happened. I've been too busy ever since I sort of started doing that, because I used to do the whole protracted. We're going to do 15 emails to get to the
Yep.
bottom of what you actually want. How are you going to license them? Where the photos going to show up? Who's going to be there? How much retouching? And now I don't have time for this anymore. And so
You're
I just put it all in one 5-page email, and I'm like, here's what it's a PDF, sorry. And I just send it to every new inquiry. I don't care if they're like, can we get on a phone call? I'm like, nope,
yeah.
take the rate sheet.
Yeah. No, I mean, but you have the luxury of doing that right now, right? I mean,
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's a luxury. I think it would
totally
literally
is,
help
dude.
everyone to just
No.
sack up.
No. That
And
okay, so
I just want to provide clarity, and that is my way of doing it.
so for if someone is a budding photographer, like in our sales training courses and stuff, like you're talking about someone that is starting out, and I don't care if they're a photographer, a cinematographer, a planner, a whatever it is. When you're just starting out, you have a decent portfolio, you have enough skill, you are going to get far more bookings by getting somebody on the phone and actually selling them. But
Do you think that the budding photographer has the business skills to upsell on the phone yet? Do you
well,
think they're going to be confident in what they're talking about, confident enough to
that's what we
perform
teach
the
them.
art of the deal on the phone?
That's what we teach is that sales aspect of how to do this over the phone. But the problem is you have the luxury of being able to do that now in your career because you have a huge number of inquiries coming in, b you have a huge body of work and a relatively straightforward process where someone goes, if I hire Mike, this is kind of what I'm getting. And C, you got plenty of money in the bank where if 80% kind of say no, but I can guarantee you from a number standpoint, if I get on the phone versus don't get off the phone, I could turn your 80% number into like you're booking 20% right now, right? If I get on the phone, I could reverse it. If I get on the phone with somebody, I could book
You're going to
80%.
be my agent?
But so that's what I'm saying is like you're in a point in your career where like that becomes very much what you should be doing. But if you're just starting out and people are comparing price points, like so let me, from my standpoint, the reason that this works for Mike Kelley is because you're freaking Mike Kelley, dude. You have the book, you have the education, you have the reputation, you have the body of work. But if you didn't have that stuff, let's say that if your work was just comparable to that of another professional person, right? And the only thing that the client can really differentiate is just price points, and you fire off a price sheet via email, they're going to make their decision purely off the number on that price sheet.
What about this? What if I told you, like Neo in the Matrix here?
What if I told you?
I feel like the number one thing that the rate sheet does is provide clarity and understanding. And I feel like so many photographers, maybe some are wonderful on the phone, you may be, they're not able to provide, and not just photographers, but graphic designers, web designers, you name it, any kind of artistic, what you need to do, because you're providing sort of a dubious service, not dubious, but in a bad way, but like,
I don't think that word is ever used in a good way. When is that word used?
it is not a measurable thing that we are providing. We're providing
Yes.
art. We're not providing 7 linear feet of fabric. We are providing something that might, the client hopes, be good enough for what they need.
Yes. Which is
And
my exact
if I can
argument of why you
provide-
need to be on the phone.
If I can provide as much clarity for what they are getting as simply and quickly as possible, I feel like people will appreciate that very much. I don't think it's an either or thing. I think maybe there are some people who want to get on the phone and chat with you. And I think there are some people who have a negative interest in that, who work a corporate job and they have 75 emails waiting for them. And they just want the answer. How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? The rate sheet provides that. No BS. And it might be a different thing. I'm doing B2B. You're doing B2C, right?
Yes. But I still would go back to the reason why. So I would be completely comfortable with that. You know, if you were to send me that rate sheet, at this point, you know, like knowing who you are, I would be completely comfortable with that. I would, in fact, appreciate that because I don't have to get on the phone. But the reason that I appreciate that is because your work, your body of work, and who you are guarantees the result. When somebody is starting out, when somebody is newer to the craft, when they don't have the reputation, and we're talking about something that's subjective, their body of work doesn't guarantee result. And frankly, a lot of clients don't really know what they want yet, especially when we're talking about something that's, when it comes to real estate and architectural photography, you can generally say that the product is a little bit more straightforward than, like, let's say, in other creative areas like logo design. If someone's going to design a logo and something like that, if someone's going to do a portrait, if someone's going to shoot a wedding, if someone's going to, all these other areas are a little bit more abstract, and you don't necessarily know, unless, again, you look at a designer's portfolio and he's got 20 years of designs, and then they just send you a rate sheet and you're like, cool. Like, I've got 20 years of backup right here that shows me exactly what you do. Then that's fine. But I'm talking about for that new budding person, they really do need to learn the process of selling, at least most of them, unless they luck their way, and not luck their way. You are fortunate enough to have created that piece of education while your business was growing.
One of the reasons I came up with the rate sheet was because I am so bad on the phone. I'm the kind of person who a buddy will call me and I'll be like, hey man, I'm moving from Orange County to San Francisco. You want to help me move for a pack of beer? And I'll be like, yeah, I'm there.
This I can attest to.
I concede so much on the phone, and I had potential clients who would be like, well, if I just want a bunch of details, will that be extra? And I'm like, no, man, like, we'll just get it there because it'll be easy and I'll have the camera set up and whatever. But that's like 6 hours of work and then way more post-production. But I'm desperate to get the client, so I'm just selling the farm on the phone. Sure. I just want them to say yes. So the rate sheet was maybe a way for me to combat myself, to keep myself in check. And it had the added upside. I am convinced, and I don't think there's only one way to do this. And I do think there's a difference between who I'm selling to and who other photographers are selling to. My primary customers are businesses. And if I can spare them the conversation, and yes, you are right in what you're saying, that I have the luxury of doing that. But I don't think it's a bad idea for people who aren't great on the phone like me. I never had the phone confidence. Go ahead.
With that piece that you said right there, I will agree with you that for the creative professional who doesn't want to learn sales, who doesn't care, who's new to this, and who literally undervalues themselves, for that person, if you have a problem and you're undervaluing yourself and you're like, I can't learn. I love the way that your hair just like moves.
What did I just do to my hair? Good Lord.
Throughout this entire conversation, every time you touch it, it just like holds its own shape. Like it's like a
crazy,
moldable sand.
Well, it's saltwater hair, I won't lie.
So for that person that, like, you're not good on the phone, you do undervalue yourself, you give away the house with everything. For that person, then yes, 100% a rate sheet is going to be better than hopping on the phone, because you're terrible on the phone. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But I think for most, it's a very important skill that they have to learn, that are going into the business, and only because of the fact of, like, it's really body of work. I mean, if you can be that good, and Mike, you are on a next level type good when it comes to this area, that, like, you could have created your entire body of work and had that to sell and done your rate sheet and been successful doing that. But I think
what do you think about building your business around your personality? I know earlier we talked about finding your artistic niche to fit your personality, but the great thing about that is you can build a business around to cater to your personality. I hate talking on the phone, therefore I have pushed it out of the business.
But the other route of that is you hate talking on the phone, so you hire somebody that's good at talking on the phone. The other route of this isn't necessarily that you. So that's why I'm saying that you have the luxury of doing this. Because if I were to say, subtract your print sales, subtract your educational revenue, subtract all the other streams of revenue that you have, and you only have architecture, then you probably would want that agent or that person to book you and to get you more gigs, right? You, at that point, you would want to increase your conversion rate of all these leads that are coming in, because that is your primary source of income. So, but I still think that yes, you do need to build the business around you. So, like if you don't like those things, then as quickly as possible, you need to hand those things off.
I do find that interesting, and I am trying to hire someone to handle all of my emails and phone calls and anything that's not directly related to taking pictures. Um, and I
Please don't make the same
feel
mistakes that you made last time with this. And we won't talk about
what's
those
that?
mistakes. We'll just talk about, hiring the wrong person.
Yeah, hiring the wrong person. I feel like I need if I could hire the right person, but again, it's you have to bring someone into the fold, and you have to almost find like a ride or die type employee who has all of these because it's going to take forever to get them familiar with the business and to get them up to speed on your personality and hiring the right clients and finding the right clients. I'm currently being approached by an agent to sell my fine artwork, and they're
Hmm.
like, we want a 50% commission, and we want all your leads and all your email lists and everything. And I'm like, no, it's crazy.
A 50% commission off of like architectural
Print
work?
sales and
Oh, print
no
sales.
print sales and work that I have done previously.
Yeah,
Whereas right
that's
now it is a little bit of a pain in the butt, but the commission is the expenses are only the printing and shipping costs. You know what I mean?
I'm smiling right now because as you say this, I'm thinking to myself, I know Mike, I know my friend, and I'm curious, how many people have you actually interviewed for this position?
When I
I think I
did it
already know the answer.
previously, no, I would say I have received 100 inquiries, and I have spoken with 3 people who I think would be a great fit for it.
So you actually look through those 100 of like people that were applying for a
Well, I mean,
job.
half of them have a typo in the subject line, and I'm just like, no, not going to work. You know how it is. You've hired people.
Mind the details. So, I mean, you're absolutely right that you do have to find that person that believes in the product, that person that is kind of ride or die. And you're never really going to truly know that. But
Mhm.
the way that we have built our business is by interviewing a lot. Like you're interviewing a lot of people to find the right fits. So I do think there'd be a lot of people that would match the criteria that you're looking for that would come in and be able to do exactly what you're asking, and you could do it with, you could still compensate them on a commission basis, not 50%, maybe 10%
Yeah,
plus whatever their baseline is.
right.
But if I was stepping into Mike's business and I was looking to say, how could I maximize this? That's what I would do. I would say, let Mike focus on photographing, education, and books. Like those are the 3 things that I want Mike to be doing. And this one person that's going to come in is going to handle everything else. It'll probably give you a better life too, my friend.
I think part of it is also is the I like running a lean operation, a very lean operation.
Yeah, you're like Lee and Patrick in
Um,
that way.
it's extremely simple for me to pivot.
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about keeping people paid. I don't need to worry about overhead expenses. The only overhead is myself, you know? So I do think there's something to be said for maybe finding someone on a commission basis. Um, but I I also just enjoy the complete, total, absolute freedom that I have built myself. If I literally do not want to work for 6 months, I can make that decision tomorrow, move to Iceland and stare at a windswept fjord for the next 6 months. I could do it.
I love where your mind
Um,
goes.
and I don't want to give that up. And I do feel like hiring an employee, maybe I just need to refine what I'm looking for. And it's someone who could keep that going in the background. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to do it, but I have very, very purposefully built this business to be to allow me an insane degree of autonomy and independence. And I don't know, I feel like I have a lot going on in my life right now beyond business. So I don't feel like right now that's the only thing I want to focus on. I'm trying to increase my hobbies and my personal enjoyment in life rather than just work all the time because I did do that for the last 10 years and
Oh,
it
for
damn
sure.
near killed me. And so then now that the business is in place, I need to sort of do something for myself a little bit. I mean, I did in 2019, I flew 190,000 miles.
That's insane. Well, and look, I mean, I'm not telling you that you should do this stuff. I'm simply addressing, going back to like what we were talking about, is if it's not in your personality, if we're talking about maximizing a business and it's not in your
Right.
personality to deal with those things, then bring one person in to actually deal with those things. So that's the
Yeah.
only
And
piece that, but I
I'm
agree
still
with you. You
trying
have to
to
build it
find,
around you.
yeah, yeah. Still trying to find that person. And I think I found a couple of great options. It's just, you know, finding the time to set aside and do the training and make sure everyone's up to speed and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah. So I'm curious from the outside looking in, when it comes to the logistics of, once you've sent out a price sheet, you still have to book the client, right? Is that pretty much
yeah.
automated, or do you still have to connect with them and take payment?
It's pretty simple. It's a contract and an estimate. And if they want to reserve a date, they have to send 50% of the estimate in advance.
Okay.
And I say, all right, that date works for me. If you want to reserve it, send 50. Like, here's an estimate with my bank wire info on it.
Got it.
Wire me the money.
So
We'll
you're
reserve
kind
the
of,
date.
there's a little bit of back and forth kind of communicating with each of these clients. And then I imagine like when
Yeah.
you're planning out the shoots, you're connecting with your assistant, you're planning the logistics, airplane, hotels. Are you still doing that?
Yeah, I'll do all that. I am an airline wizard, as you can imagine. So it takes me 30 seconds to find like the optimal routing and the right seat on the right plane with the right connection in the right time. I love that. That's kind of a hobby of mine there. And it's a relatively quick process, especially for clients who I've done this with before, who know how I operate and I know how they operate. And
Yeah.
the repeat clients are my favorite. And I have 4 or 5 clients. People think I work all the time and I'm constantly shooting. I have
Yeah.
4 or 5 clients who I shoot 10 projects a year for. And right there, it's 50 gigs.
Oh, that's
And
crazy.
those are my core.
I didn't know you had that kind of consistency in those repeat clients.
Yeah. And those are sort of my core clients. And they respect what I do and they allow me autonomy and independence. And they say, here's the house. You're going to stay there with the owner, do your thing, or here's where the house is, get yourself a hotel, or I'm going to fly you here for a week and we're going to shoot 7 projects. I don't really have time to be there with you, but I trust you. And that's what I love about this is I've never really been a financially motivated person. For me, the most important thing is being completely debt free, being beholden to no person, and complete independence. And so I have my clients, I think it's 4 of them, maybe 5. It kind of comes and goes. But these are people that I will shoot for, and then we'll go get tequila, or we'll go to the bar after the shoot, or we'll meet for dinner. And they're like my friends at this point. And a lot of photographers will send them messages and be like, I can do it like this for half the price. And we'll laugh about this because they're never going to hire anyone else unless I burn a house down. You know what I mean?
That's hilarious.
And I've gotten to the point where like it's just a self-sustaining thing. And maybe I'll find a few more clients in the future who just trust me on that level. But as their business grows, my business grows, we grow together. It's more of a relationships thing than a dollars and cents thing for me. I have also noticed that after I made a certain amount of money, 70 grand, I don't know, roughly, I am not any happier of a person with making more money. I am happier doing personal projects, playing guitar, playing music, traveling, hanging out with my family. Once I sort of hit that income threshold of my needs are met, there are amazing perks that I can find, like, flying in business class or something. That makes me happy for 10 minutes,
Yeah.
right? But my overall baseline happiness does not increase with more
I would
money.
say for
It
the
increases
duration
with
of the
more
flight, Mike.
independence.
For the duration of the
What's that?
flight, I would say for the duration of the flight, I would be
Yeah,
much
the
happier
duration of the flight.
in business
Um,
class.
but what makes
I
me happier is total independence. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
no,
And what makes some people happier, maybe building a business empire and hiring 50 people. I just want to do something with my friends, with Lee and Patrick, with my assistant, with some
thanks
of the
for including
independent
me in that, Mike.
contractors in my life who do my retouching and do my styling. Like I want to hire these people and work with them because I have fun with them. And that's, if you add stress to my life, it better come with a big paycheck
So
because I really don't need it, and it's not what it.
First of all,
And
I'm
so,
offended
yeah,
that
go
I
ahead.
was not appended onto the Lee, Patrick, and Pie. Second, I do think that for a lot of people, I agree with you. I agree with everything that you're saying right now. Like that, beyond a certain income threshold, what you really should be seeking are the experiences, the things that make you happy, right? And I believe that beyond a certain threshold, that stuff is not like necessarily critical. But the tough part for most people of all of this is those that are going about creating their own business of any sort is getting themselves to the position where they actually have the luxury to say no. That is a luxury. The
Hmm.
ability to be able to say no means that you've arrived at least at that threshold where you can say now, anything more is icing on the cake. I don't need it. I can say no unless I, really want to do that thing.
Yeah. And
So,
I feel very fortunate in that I was young when I sort of discovered. It's funny, Lee and Patrick come visit me in Los Angeles, and they see me living in a 500 square foot, $1,700 a month studio in Burbank. And they're like,
mhm.
what are you doing? You can afford, you can have a house that overlooks Los Angeles, and you live in this thumbprint sized apartment. Why do you do this? And I'm like, because that's not going to make me happy because I photograph these homes for a living and I don't need something excessive. I just need what I need. Or, like maybe I would spend extravagantly on business expenses, but when it comes to personal expenses, I'll still stand there in the aisle comparing peanut butters to save a dollar. You know what I mean?
I'm with you
Um,
on that side, dude. I live like a pauper, but I like that side of it because it's what affords me the freedom. Like
exactly.
if
Yeah.
if things were to be taken away, like we're as a business, I mean, so many of the things that you're saying, I agree 100% with. Like I would say Justin, Chris, and I, we agree. Like we've seen what it is to build a large company, and then to see how much more lean that company can be run. And 2020 was a year that really forced our hand and saying like, how lean can you become? And it's
Hmm.
been an incredible kind of learning experience to see like, okay, there's levels of lean beyond what we even thought was possible, where we're still creating great products. We are our core team, like those things are all super important. And like you said, this is the thing with your experiences and going through the homes that you've been through. For most people, they're like, man, I really want to have a nice house. I don't want to say most people, but a lot of people think I really want to have a nice house because I want to,
Yeah.
show that I've made it and stuff. But dude, you've walked through, you've photographed $150 million homes. Nothing that you buy is impressive to on any level whatsoever. Like compared to the
Right.
things that you have photographed, nothing you purchase
Yeah.
could ever be impressive. So why would you try to seek happiness from that arena? Why would you try to go that? And that makes complete sense, dude. I feel the same way. Like I've always lived well below my means. So
Hmm.
if everything is taken away from me, I know I can survive for years like without
Yeah.
working, without making anything. And that's a freedom that
Mhm.
I don't think most people understand or have
But
experienced.
you have made sacrifices, I'm sure, to ensure that. And I feel like, again, this just comes back to personality. I scrimped and saved and made sure that if something happened, and it happened, I had to get back surgery in January.
Yeah,
And literally between November and June, I did not take a single photograph.
that's crazy.
And
That's
that
six
was only
months.
possible because for the last 10 years, I had been saving enough to make sure that I would not have to worry when I ruptured a disc. And if something happens like that, I don't want my life to crumble. So years ago, I told myself I am going to live off a fraction of my salary and everything else I'm just going to save.
Yeah.
I don't care how much I'm making. I mean, and it changes depending on how good of a year I have, but I keep my paycheck exactly the same every month, and that's what I live in as a fraction of my income. And that way, that kind of ensures that I can retain this lifestyle. And yes, I'm very fortunate that I was able to sort of be inspired by people who did that, and have the opportunity to pursue a career that allowed me to do that. But I also feel like it's a personality thing, and some people they don't want independence like that. Maybe they want a family. I'm 33. I'm not married. I don't have children. Some people at 25 know they want marriage and kids,
Hmm.
and they would rather get the stable job to ensure that the family continues to thrive while they make that sacrifice. Whereas I made the sacrifice the other way. I want career independence, but a family. I'm not going to say family's not important. My family is very important to me, my mother and sister and father and that sort of thing. But I have foregone the other route to make my life easier in terms of independence. And maybe 5 years from now, when I have children, I will have, I maybe have lost 15 years of the opportunity to be a father or something. But I knew full well what I was doing when I did that. So
Yeah, that's important though, because you had the childhood and the upbringing that afforded you that decision, right? Because
right.
there's a lot of people that don't. Like, there's a lot of people that just kind of get thrust into, I have to provide. Like, there's not enough food on the table growing up. I'm kind of, you kind of grow up with the famine mindset of like, there's not enough. So they begin a career. A lot of people go down the family route, not because they necessarily want to when they're that young, but maybe because they got pregnant and they said the next thing that we're going to do is get married and we're going to do all this. So there's a lot of things that like we have in our control in terms of like the decisions that you've made. There's a lot of things that are out of control, like in terms of just where's our family position and what are we born into. And those are the situations where I truly feel and truly respect when someone can be born into poverty, but still come away with that feast mindset of like, if I delay gratification and if I make these decisions, then I can really kind of improve on my life and give my children a better future. That's incredible to see. But yes, you're spot on. You are the person when I think of like delayed gratification for like saving and for all these different things, you're one of the persons that people that come to mind, because you have that ability to very much look long term on everything that you do. And that's part of the reason why you're able to create, that personal project that you did. There was no need for that to do anything right then other than just simply enjoyment. And that's
Right.
what came from that delayed gratification, was everything else from it.
Yeah. And if you're listening and you want to set up your child for delayed gratification, send them to an all-boys school. Just keep them away from women and make sure that they learn no social interaction skills whatsoever until they graduate college. And still,
This is a fantastic idea. I think I'm going to start training my children how to not be able to speak to people. I feel like you underserve yourself in that area. I feel like you are a quite charismatic person. I don't know. I know that you're introverted, but
yeah.
one of the things that I'm kind of curious about, given your style of communication and everything, what is it like being on set with Lee and Patrick?
The thing with them, like, you ever watch Top Gear?
Oh yeah, I love Top
I
Gear.
feel like the three of us are Clarkson, Hammond, and May.
Okay, who's who?
I am May.
That's who I would
Patrick
have
is
said too.
obviously Hammond,
Yeah.
and
Okay,
Lee is Clarkson, without question.
that's pretty spot on.
And we all get along really well. Um, and it's just a perfect combination of three different personality types, all sort of keeping each other in check, but pushing each other to do new things. And we've somehow never gotten sick of each other. And it's like the band I never had. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was
With our
kind of thinking
music
of the same
background.
thing. Is could you if your bandmates were these two, could you have done that? Could you have done
Yes.
music?
Yeah. I mean, we have nothing to sing about, but yes, I think we could. It's not like, we had a crazy childhood or protest songs to write or anything like that. But it would be the most suburban white bread band you'd ever heard of. But we do have these personalities, and I think we all keep each other in check. That's what's great about it, is no one is allowed to let their head get too big,
Yeah.
or be be too sad for too long, or whatever it is. And there's like just enough concern shown for one another, but it doesn't get to the point of sappiness. It is literally is Top Gear Photography Edition. And there's a few videos we've all done together that are on YouTube, and if you watch those, it's like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
People are in the comments like, the chemistry that you three have is ridiculous. I don't understand.
No, it's fun. It's fun to watch, and it's fun to watch the three of you guys on all those videos. So, hey man, I've almost had you for a couple hours here, and I want to not take up too much of your time because I want to bring you back. I want you to be one of our regulars that we can bring on. But as we wrap up, let me just quickly mention the different places that people can find you. So if you are interested in education from architectural photography to real estate, they can find your courses on fstoppers.com, correct?
Correct, yes. fstoppers.com/store. That's where all the tutorials are hidden away. The blog is constantly, there's like 10 posts a day, so they will never see me on there. But if you go to fstoppers.com/store, or if you go to my website, www.mpkelley.com, I should say https://www.
We'll link it all up. So mpkelley.com.
My Instagram is mpkelley with an underscore, yeah.
Perfect. We're going to link that up as well. And your book, as well as, so you guys have the upcoming courses that are coming out, so be on the lookout for those. What about your book? Is that on mpkelley.com?
Yeah, that's all my books are on there. There's a number that I've done, and you can find them. There's like a whole books heading that you can navigate to and click, and they'll bring you into there.
Awesome. And then if you are looking for an architectural photographer or real estate, although in real estate probably can't afford Mike, but for an architectural photographer, I can't recommend Mike enough. You guys need to look him up. And that's it, brother. I appreciate you being on. I'll hopefully be seeing you soon. Me.
A great chat, and I think we touched on some really nice topics. So thanks again for having me. It's a great conversation.
Awesome, dude. We'll take it easy.
All right. Cool. Did I sound like how much of a douche? 1 to 10.
Dude, you were fantastic. What are you talking about? Anthony over here is like, this is a really good episode. And I'm like, yeah, it's really good.
I don't know. I just hope it doesn't sound like too privilegey. You know what I mean?
No, don't be. I mean, I was helping to kind of like bring it back to, I'm not going to let our audience think of those things that way. That's why I'm kind of like bringing it up in conversation and allowing you to address it.
And I do think that we had a great chat about like the rate sheet versus, how you sell, how I sell, and how there's both valid point. And I'm sitting there like, damn, I should have someone on the phone for me. And you're probably like, damn, I should have some kind of rate sheet that I can just send when I can't get on the phone or whatever. So
what I wish is, I wish my product was that straightforward. I wish like if I created that one thing that was that simple to do, I would 100% be down for the rate sheet,
Yeah.
With the amount of customization and the amount of like room there is to like for a wedding product and a portrait product, it's difficult because most often people that come to us don't know what they want. And so, but yeah, I loved all the conversation that we were having, dude. It was fantastic. And
I actually have a question.
Oh yeah, Anthony's right here.
Because just like you, I love airplanes. I've seen your photo a long time ago. I can't believe it's you.
You got a little fan right here.
But as somebody, I'm only 26 right now, so I'm still like early in the stages. And I actually wanted to ask is, I'm also like very introverted, like you.
Why didn't you ask this on the freaking podcast?
Was that?
You're supposed to ask this question.
Well, I didn't know I was allowed to interject.
Yes, like, you're allowed to say whatever you want.
It's my first time. So my question is kind of like in the early stages, you said you had very limited equipment. You're just kind of going around shooting whatever you can. How did you kind of struggle with kind of dealing with doubt if you ever faced like doubt with what you were doing? Like, how did you kind of push through that?
I have delusions of grandeur.
Hold on, Mike.
I think,
Anthony, you're going to actually cut this into the video. So this part of the video is where Anthony saves his question for the very last and somehow asks it after we stop. So what Anthony's going to do is actually cut this piece in, and then you're going to play that little question that you had, and then Mike's going to answer it because there's probably a lot of people that actually have that exact same question. Gotcha. So now, Mike, go.
Started this as like an interjection, like, the interjection from above. And Anthony's like, hold on. I got a question. And you can cut it in wherever you want.
Okay. You do that now. So you're going to do the hold on.
And we're like, we're in the middle of a conversation. What's going on? And then you ask a great question, and it leads us down another rabbit hole.
Let's do this.
Just fake it?
Yep.
Okay.
So we're...
hold on. I have a question, actually.
Anthony's chiming in.
Who's that? Is that like the voice of God? I haven't heard him yet.
No, Anthony is stepping in for Mike today, and I'm so glad, Anthony, that he actually is here to not only pull up stuff to help edit, but then also he needs to chime in. We've waited quite a while to hear you speak, Anthony, so go ahead.
So you guys obviously are very well into your careers, so it's a way different perspectives. So for somebody like me who is still very young, and I feel
did you hear that he just said that we're old? That literally was like,
I said well into the career, like that's different thing.
Just keep going, dude.
So for somebody who is kind of more in the early stages, obviously in the early stages you face a lot of doubt, you face a lot of questions because the entire world is so open-ended at that point. You're at a point where you're still relatively like unrefined. So when you're at that stage, how do you kind of overcome the doubt and the anxiety of maybe having too many choices in front of you, or just not knowing if you're taking the right path, but maybe you might be, you just don't know it? Like, how do you kind of deal with that, the thought process, I guess?
That's a good question.
That is a great question. I did not know what I wanted to do with my life or how I wanted to do it. All I figured out, and I just saw that photography kind of came to me on a silver platter. I was in the emergency room in Reno, Nevada, and I met a real estate developer in the emergency room. And I, at the time, was living in Lake Tahoe, trying to make a living as a snowboarder. And she said, "What do you do for fun? Like, what are your hobbies?" And I'm like, music and photography. And she's like, "Oh my God, you're a photographer. I need a photographer. My photographer just quit. Can you take pictures of houses?" And I was like, "Absolutely. How hard can it be?" And the whole story is a very long story, but she ended up hiring me to do one house for $200, and I did it. And I said, "This is the most fun I've ever had making money in my entire life. This is what I want to do." And I didn't even know that it was an option until that happened. And I kind of had the freedom in my life. Maybe this goes back to the whole how do you set up a business for your own personality type of thing, to just say, that's what I want to do. I'm done snowboarding. This is not working. Photography is a nice injury-free creative way to make a living. And I could be self-directed. And so I just sort of latched onto it. And I said, I don't want to work in an office. I don't want to wear a suit. I want to wear what I want to do. I want to be my own boss. And, frankly, I don't care if I made a living photographing soda cans. If I could find a career that allowed me to live that life, I would jump at it. And photography was one means to an end. And I never had a passion for architecture. I've kind of gotten one now because I've been exposed to it. But I'm telling you, maybe I would have been photographing like Glade plugins for a living. I don't know. Whatever asinine subject it is, as long as it allowed me to live the life that I wanted. I tell people, don't choose a career because you think you like the job. Choose a career that allows you to live the life you want to live. And is that a family life? Is that an independent life? Is that some kind of creative life? Is that a more structured life? Is it a teammate sort of life? Pick a job based on that rather than your interest, and you'll have a very fulfilling career as a result. And so that's kind of how I ended up here.
So that's super interesting because, there is some level of blind luck and just like the recommendation can't be to Anthony, go put yourself in an emergency room and hopefully someone asks you to take a picture of their home. But there was some level of luck in falling into that real estate side. But one of the things that I think Anthony is drawing on is like, there was a certain amount of like kind of blind optimism that you could actually do that thing. Where did that confidence come from?
I think that comes from being young and dumb.
Yeah, I think
honestly,
I think the tricky side to today's era is with social media being as like prevalent as it is. It's so easy to like compare yourself, and that's why you do get a lot of these comments saying like, I don't have this, I don't have that, because it's flooded by all this content of people maybe supposedly seemingly having greater things than the viewer might. And so might just be like a new, or like a product of just the era that we live in.
That's interesting. Mike, if you rewinded the clock, and let's say that you actually had seen tons of different architectural photography done by good photographers, like let's say social media kind of existed back then, would you have felt like, I can't do this? Would you have felt like, okay, there's no way?
I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's both inspiring and terrifying.
Yeah. That's an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah. Because you can see that it's possible, but it also seems insurmountable.
Yeah, for sure. There's when you haven't been exposed to that, then you're kind of like, yeah, I could probably do this. But if you've been exposed,
oh my God! And I suffered from Dunning-Kruger. You know what that is? Like people who know the least think they know the most.
Oh yeah. I think we all suffered from that. What is that called?
Dunning-Kruger. The Dunning-Kruger syndrome. It is only in the past few years where I've actually been able to be comfortable with the fact that, okay, here's what I don't know. What I do know is incredible, and what I can do is amazing, but there's still so much that I don't know. And I learn more. Why I love architectural photography is because not only does it let me live this independent lifestyle, but every single picture I take is different. Every single one is an exercise in mental gymnastics and figuring out, because the light's always different, the home's always different, nothing is ever the same. So every picture is a new puzzle to solve. But before I get too deep in this rabbit hole, I also feel like I was raised in a very sort of the world is your oyster kind of way.
For sure.
And I can't thank my parents enough for that. And they literally let me do whatever it was I wanted to do. And they were very encouraging and supportive. And I went through God knows how many asinine phases in my life. I wanted to be a professional paintball player. I wanted to be a professional skateboarder. I wanted to be a professional musician. And they were like, we will support you. You can try all these things. There's no reason you can't. They never discouraged me. Maybe there was an eyebrow raise. Maybe it was an astronaut phase. Maybe it was a paleontologist phase. But they were always, and I think that sort of laid a great foundation for me to have the attitude of how hard can it possibly be?
Yeah.
If my parents have been supporting me and saying, oh, of course you can do that. Why couldn't you do that, Mike? You know what I mean?
I love that.
And I do owe a great deal to that. You know, as much as I want to kill my parents from time to time today, you know, like as you get older, that tends to happen. But they were incredible in raising me to believe that I could literally do anything. And I think that is something that's amazing about America for all of its problems, is that we do instill this sort of you can do absolutely anything belief into our children. And I think it really helps.
Some of them get it.
Some of them, of course. But I was very fortunate enough to have that. And
for sure,
that's my answer. I wish I could say, oh, like I read a book and it told me I could do anything. But I think I had this constant reinforcement from great parents and great teachers. And I knew early on that I wanted to live a certain lifestyle that allowed me to travel and to be my own boss and this and that all of these contributing factors came together and allowed me to recognize the opportunity that photography was presenting. Even though I knew nothing about photography or photographing houses, I was like, this is it. Yeah. Take this opportunity and do what you want. Yeah.
Well, I love that your parents did that for you. And I think for everyone that's fortunate to have the parents, you know, to give them that's incredible. And for everyone that is a parent, like that reminds me, obviously, like this is so important to instill on my children. Like one of the things that I constantly am thinking about is every time that they fail, I'm encouraging them and saying, if you have failed at something, you're on the right path. Like you're actually doing it the way that you should be doing it. It just means that we need to keep going. But for those that didn't get that instilled, there has to be that jump off point. There has to be that acceptance of like, I'm just going to go and do this and I'm going to figure it out. And guess what? I know my early work is not going to be as good as what's going to come down the road, but I'm going to get there type thing. That mentality is what you had of, I'm going to get there. I'm going to figure it out. Like, I'm just going to go and do it and figure it out.
I also think the absolute number one, well, arguably the biggest thing that helped me be successful is skateboarding as a child.
Interesting. Falling repeatedly over and over, trying again.
Broke so many bones and ate so much shit, and no one was there to clap for me
Yeah.
or get a video to post on Instagram, I would literally go beat myself up accidentally day after day. And it taught me that what you're trying, you might fall flat on your face. You might break your wrist. You might break your nose. Like I broke my nose surfing, broke my wrist snowboarding, broke my foot skateboard. I've done everything. Like every part of me, even the back surgery I had was a result of some sport injury. But the ability to have a sport that you would do independently, that no one was there to cheer you on, that if you wanted to do something, you had to practice it over and over and over and carry the risk of injury. It really taught me that even if a client tells me my photos are absolute crap and they never want to work with me again, I'm like, whatever. Like I have literally,
it pales in comparison, right?
And,
it pales in comparison to all the other stuff that you've been through.
And I do think that I'm not a parent, but I see what we're doing with children these days, and everyone gets an award and everything is child-proofed. Let the kids get hurt. They will be okay. It's the parents we have to worry about. If my mother breaks a hip, it's life-ending. If I break a wrist skateboarding, it's affirming in a way. It's almost incredible and inspiring, not to go down like a whole health insurance rabbit hole and the state of that whole thing, but it was, I think some of the best things that ever happened to me were injury as a child, me getting hurt, me having to dust myself up, and for 15 years try again to become good at a sport like that. And it doesn't have to be skateboarding. It could be hockey or baseball or soccer or whatever it is, but I do think that it's hugely beneficial for children to have some kind of outlet, some risk involved, so that they can learn on their own. Like maybe they will fall on the playground and split their head open and break a tooth, and it will teach them that that is not the end of the world. You know what I mean?
This is why I beat my children every day, Mike. Every day.
Is that what that room is for in your house? The one with the padlock on it?
I feel like I need to say I'm just kidding, because there's going to be people out there that don't think that I'm kidding. But just kidding. There. So I agree 100% though. Like if a child is too protected, where they don't get that experience of failing and repeating and getting, these, like we want to, I hope I can prevent my kids from, having their head split open, but a bloody nose here and there, a scraped knee, like those are things that they have to learn from and experience to be able to get to you sitting in the hospital bed and being presented from something, like you're presented with a wacky opportunity and you're like, yeah, I can do this. I've done a whole bunch of other stuff. Like I can do this.
I have done things that are so much scarier with so much less payoff. It doesn't even move the needle,
I love it, man.
So.
Okay. You got to figure out where to cut that in.
Yeah, I'll squeeze it in there. Place.
Brother, I don't want to take any more of your time. I will chat with you soon.
Oh, no, that was great. I loved it. I loved the last conversation. That was the best part. Now the whole thing feels amazing. So thank you.
You rocked it, dude. It's going to be fun having you back.